Chapter 25. There are, of course, many problems connected with life, of which some of the most popular are: why are people born? Why do they die? Why do they want to spend so much of the intervening time wearing digital watches? Many, many millions of years ago, a race of hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings, whose physical manifestation in their own pan-dimensional universe is not dissimilar to our own, got so fed up with the constant bickering about the meaning of life, which used to interrupt their favorite pastime of Brockian ultra cricket, a curious game which involved suddenly hitting people for no readily apparent reason and then running away, that they decided to sit down and solve their problems once and for all. And to this end, they built themselves a stupendous supercomputer, which was so amazingly intelligent that even before its databanks had been connected up, it had started from, I think, therefore I am, and got as far as deducing the existence of rice pudding and income tax before anyone managed to turn it off. It was the size of a small city. The main console was installed in a specially designed executive office, mounted on an enormous executive desk of finest ultra mahogany topped with rich ultra-red leather. The dark carpeting was discreetly sumptuous. Exotic pot plants and tastefully engraved prints of the principal computer programmers and their families were deployed liberally about the room, and stately windows looked out upon a tree-lined public square. On the day of the great on-turning, two soberly dressed programmers with briefcases arrived and were shown discreetly into the office. They were aware that this day they would represent their entire race in its greatest moment, but they conducted themselves calmly and quietly as they seated themselves deferentially before the desk, opened their briefcases and took out their leather-bound notebooks. Their names were Lunkwil and Fook. For a few moments they sat in respectful silence. Then, after exchanging a quiet glance with Fook, Lunkwil leaned forward and touched a small black panel. The subtlest of hums indicated that the massive computer was now in total active mode. After a pause, it spoke to them with a voice rich, resonant, and deep. It said, "What is this great task for which I, Deep Thought, the second greatest computer in the universe of time and space, have been called into existence?" Lunkwil and Fook glanced at each other in surprise. "Your task, O computer," began Fook. "No, wait a minute, this isn't right," said Lunkwil, worried. We distinctly designed this computer to be the greatest one ever, and we're not making do with the second best. Deep Thought," he addressed the computer, "are you not, as we designed you to be, the greatest, most powerful computer in all time?" "I described myself as the second greatest," intoned Deep Thought, "and such I am." Another worried look passed between the two programmers. Lunkwil cleared his throat. "There must be some mistake," he said. Are you not a greater computer than the Millard Gargantubrain and Maximegalon, which can count all the atoms in a star in a millisecond?" "The Millard Gargantubrain," said Deep Thought with unconcealed contempt. "A mere abacus. Mention it not." "And are you not," said Fook, leaning anxiously forward, "a greater analyst than the Googleplex star thinker in the seventh galaxy of light and ingenuity, which can calculate the trajectory of every single dust particle throughout a 5-week Dangraband beta sand blizzard?" "A 5-week sand blizzard," said Deep Thought haughtily. "You ask this of me, who have contemplated the very vectors of the atoms in the Big Bang itself? Molest me not with this pocket calculator stuff." The two programmers sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Lunkwil leaned forward again. "But are you not," he said, "a more fiendish disputant than the great hyperbolic omnicognate neutron wrangler of Psychrionics 12, the magic and indefatigable? The great hyperlonic omnicog I love all these words. The great hyperlovic omnicognate neutron wrangler," said Deep Thought, thoroughly rolling the R's, "could talk all 4 legs off an Acturan megadonkey, but only I could persuade it to go for a walk afterward." "Then what," asked Fook, "is the problem?" There is no problem, said Deep Thought with magnificent ringing tones. I am simply the second greatest computer in the universe of space and time. But the second? Asked Lunkwell. Why do you keep saying the second? You're surely not thinking of the multi-corticode perspectron titan Muller, are you? Or the pondermatic, or the contemptuous lights flashed across the computer's console. I spare not a single unit of thought on these cybernetic simpletons, he boomed. I speak of none but the computer that is to come after me. Fook was losing patience. He pushed his notebook aside and muttered, I think this is getting needlessly messianic. You know nothing of future time, pronounced Deep Thought, and yet in my teeming circuitry, I can navigate the infinite data streams of future probability and see that there must one day come a computer whose merest operational parameters I am not worthy to calculate, but which it will be my fate eventually to design. Fuchs sighed heavily and glanced across to Lunkwell. Can we get on and ask the question, he asked. Lunkwell motioned him to wait. What computer is this of which you speak, he asked. I will speak of it no further in this present time, said Deep Thought. Now, ask what else of me you will that I may function. Speak. They shrugged at each other. Fuchs composed himself. Oh, Deep Thought computer, he said, the task we have designed you to perform is this. We want you to tell us, he paused, the answer. The answer, said Deep Thought. The answer to what? Life, urged Fuchs. The universe, said Lunkwell. Everything, they said in chorus. Deep Thought paused for a moment's reflection. Tricky, he said finally. But can you do it? Again, a significant pause. Yes, said Deep Thought, I can do it. There is an answer, said Fuchs with breathless excitement. A simple answer, asked Lunkwell. Yes, said Deep Thought. Life, the universe, and everything. There is an answer. But, he added, I'll have to think about it. A sudden commotion destroyed the moment. The door flew open and two angry men wearing the coarse faded blue robes and belts of the Crookswan University burst into the room, thrusting aside the ineffectual flunky who tried to bar their way. We demand admission, shouted the younger of the two men, elbowing a pretty young secretary in the throat. Come on, shouted the older one. You can't keep us out. He pushed a junior programmer back through the door. We demand that you can't keep us out, bawled the younger one, though he was now firmly inside the room and no further attempts were being made to stop him. Who are you? Said Lunkwell, raising angrily from his seat. What do you want? I am Midgicthes, announced the older one, and I demand that I am Vroomfondle, shouted the younger one. Midgicthes turned on Vroomfondle. It's all right, he explained angrily. You don't need to demand that. All right, howled Vroomfondle, banging on a nearby desk. I am Vroomfondle, and this is not a demand. That is a solid fact. What we demand is solid facts. No, we don't, exclaimed Midgicthes in irritation. That is precisely what we don't demand. Scarcely pausing for breath, Vroomfondle shouted, We don't demand solid facts. What we demand is a total absence of solid facts. I demand that I may or may not be Vroomfondle. But who the devil are you? Exclaimed an outraged Fuchs. We, said Midgicthes, are philosophers. Though we may not be, said Vroomfondle, waving a warning finger at the programmers. Yes, we are, insisted Midgicthes. We are quite definitely here as representatives of the amalgamation union of philosophers, sages, luminaries, and other thinking persons, and we want this machine off, and we want it off now. What's the problem? Said Lunkwell. I'll tell you what the problem is, mate, said Midgicthes. Demarcation, that's the problem. We demand, yelled Vroomfondle, that demarcation may or may not be the problem. You just let the machines get on with the adding up, warned Midgicthes, and we'll take care of the eternal verities. Thank you very much. You want to check your legal position, you do, mate? Under law, the quest for ultimate truth is quite clearly the inalienable prerogative of your working thinkers. Any bloody machine goes and actually finds it, and we're straight out of a job, aren't we? I mean, what's the use of our sitting up half the night arguing that there may or may not be a God if this machine only goes and gives you his bleeding phone number the next morning? That's right, shouted Broomfondle. We demand rigidly defined areas of doubt and uncertainty. Suddenly, a stentorian voice boomed across the room. Might I make an observation at this point? Inquired Deep Thought. We'll go on strike, yelled Broomfondle. That's right, agreed Majixes. You'll have a national philosopher's strike on your hands. The hum level in the room suddenly increased as several ancillary bass driver units mounted in sedately carved and varnished cabinet speakers around the room cut in to give Deep Thought's voice a little more power. All I wanted to say, bellowed the computer, is that my circuits are now irrevocably committed to calculating the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. He paused and satisfied himself that he now had everyone's attention before continuing more quietly. But the program will take me a little while to run. Fook glanced impatiently at his watch. How long? He said. 7.5 million years, said Deep Thought. Lunquill and Fook blinked at each other. 7.5 million years? They cried in chorus. Yes, demanded Deep Thought. I said I'd have to think about it, didn't I? And it occurs to me that running a program like this is bound to create an enormous amount of popular publicity for the whole area of philosophy in general. Everyone's going to have their own theories about what answer I'm eventually going to come up with, and who better to capitalize on that media market than you yourselves? So long as you can keep disagreeing with each other violently enough and maligning each other in the popular press, and so long as you have clever agents, you can keep yourselves on the gravy train for life. How does that sound? The two philosophers gaped at him. Bloody hell, said Majixes. Now that is what I call thinking. Here, Broomfondle, why do we never think of things like that? Dunno, said Broomfondle in an awed whisper. Think our brains must be too highly trained, Majixes. So saying, they turned on their heels and walked out of the door and into a lifestyle beyond their wildest dreams. Chapter 26. Yes, very salutary, said Arthur, after Slarty Bartfast had related the silent points of this story to him. But I don't understand what all this has got to do with the earth and mice and things. That is but the first half of the story, Earthman, said the old man. If you would care to discover what happened 7.5 million years later, on the great day of the answer, allow me to invite you to my study, where you can experience the events yourself on our tape records. That is, unless you would care to take a quick stroll on the surface of New Earth. It's only half completed, I'm afraid. We haven't even finished burying the artificial dinosaur skeletons in the crust yet. Then we have the tertiary and quaternary periods of the Cenozoic era to lay down. No, thank you, said Arthur. It wouldn't be quite the same. No, said Slarty Bartfast, it wouldn't be. And he turned the air car around and headed back toward the mind-numbing wall. Chapter 27. Slarty Bartfast's study was a total mess, like the results of an explosion in a public library. The old man frowned as they stepped in. Terribly unfortunate, he said. A diode blew in one of the life-supporting computers. When we tried to revive our cleaning staff, we discovered they'd been dead for nearly 30,000 years. Who's going to clear away the bodies? That's what I want to know. Look, why don't you sit yourself down over there and let me plug you in? He gestured Arthur toward a chair and looked as if it had been made out of the rib cage of a stegosaurus. It was made out of the rib cage of a stegosaurus, explained the old man as he pottered about fishing bits of wire out from under tottering piles of paper and drawing instruments. Here, he said, hold these, and passed a couple of stripped wire ends to Arthur. The instant he took hold of them, a bird flew straight through him. He was suspended in midair and totally invisible to himself. Beneath him was a pretty tree-lined city square, and all around it, as far as the eye could see, were white concrete buildings of airy, spacious design, but somewhat the worse for wear. Many were cracked and stained with rain. Today, however, the sun was shining. A fresh breeze danced lightly through the trees, and the odd sensation that all the buildings were quietly humming was probably caused by the fact that the square and all the streets around it were thronged with cheerful, excited people. Somewhere a band was playing, brightly colored flags were fluttering in the breeze, and the spirit of carnival was in the air. Arthur felt extraordinarily lonely, stuck up in the air above it all without so much as a body to his name. But before he had time to reflect on this, a voice rang out across the square and called for everyone's attention. A man standing on a brightly dressed dais before the building, which clearly dominated the square, was addressing the crowd over a tannoy. "O people who wait in the shadows of deep thought," he cried out, "honored descendants of Broomfondle and Majigsthes, the greatest, most truly interesting pundits of the universe has ever known. The time of waiting is over." Wild cheers broke out among the crowd. Flags, streamers, and wolf whistles sailed through the air. The narrower streets looked rather like centipedes rolling over on their backs and frantically waving their legs in the air. 7.5 million years our race has waited for this great and hopefully enlightening day, cried the cheerleader. The day of the answer. Hurrahs burst from the ecstatic crowd. "Never again," cried the men, "never again will we wake up in the morning and think, who am I? What is my purpose in life? Does it really, cosmically speaking, matter if I don't get up and go to work? For today we will finally learn, once and for all, the plain and simple answer to all those nagging little problems of life, the universe, and everything." As the crowd erupted once again, Arthur found himself gliding through the air toward one of the large stately windows on the first floor of the building behind the dais from which the speaker was addressing the crowd. He experienced a moment's panic as he sailed straight toward the window, which passed when a second or so later he found he had gone right through the solid glass without apparently touching it. No one in the room remarked on his peculiar arrival, which is hardly surprising as he wasn't there. He began to realize that the whole experience was merely a recorded projection, which knocked 6-track 70mm into a cocked hat. The room was much as Slarty Bartfast had described it. In 7.5 million years, it had been well looked after and cleaned regularly every century or so. The ultra-mahogany desk was worn at the edges, the carpet a little faded now, but the large computer terminal sat in sparkling glory on the desk's leather top, as bright as if it had been constructed yesterday. Two severely dressed men sat respectfully before the terminal and waited. "The time is nearly upon us," said one, and Arthur was surprised to see a world suddenly materialize in thin air just by the man's neck. The word was loonqual, and it flashed a couple of times and then disappeared again. Before Arthur was able to assimilate this, the other man spoke, and the word fooge appeared by his neck. 75,000 generations ago, our ancestors set this program in motion, the second man said, and in all that time, we will be the first to hear the computers speak. An awesome prospect, Fooge, agreed the man. And Arthur suddenly realized he was watching a recording with subtitles. "We are the ones who will hear," said Fooge, "the answer to the question of life. The universe," said Loonqual, "and everything." "Shh," said Loonqual with a slight gesture. "I think Deep Thought is preparing to speak." There was a moment's expectant pause while panels slowly came to life in front of the console. Lights flashed on and off experimentally and settled down into a businesslike pattern. A soft low hum came from the communication channel. "Good morning," said Deep Thought at last. Good morning, oh Deep Thought," said Loonqual nervously. "Do you have, that is—" "An answer for you?" interrupted Deep Thought majestically. "Yes, I have." The two men shivered with expectancy. Their waiting had not been in vain. "There really is one?" breathed Fooge. "There really is one," confirmed Deep Thought. "To everything? The great question of life, the universe, and everything?" "Yes." Both of the men had been trained for this moment. Their lives had been a preparation for it. They had been selected at birth as those who would witness the answer. But even so, they found themselves gasping and squirming like excited children. Are you ready to give it to us? Urged Loonqual. I am. Now? Now, said Deep Thought. They both licked their dry lips. Though I don't think, added Deep Thought, that you're going to like it. Doesn't matter, said Fushk. We must know it, now. Now? Inquired Deep Thought. Yes, now. All right, said the computer, and settled into silence again. The two men fidgeted. The tension was unbearable. You're really not going to like it, observed Deep Thought. Tell us. All right, said Deep Thought. The answer to the great question. Yes? Of life, the universe, and everything, said Deep Thought. Yes? Is, said Deep Thought, and paused. Yes? Is, yes? 42, said Deep Thought, with infinite majesty and calm. Chapter 28. It was a long time before anyone spoke. Out of the corner of his eye, Fushk could see the sea of tense, expectant faces down in the square outside. We're going to get lynched, aren't we? He whispered. It was a tough assessment, said Deep Thought mildly. 42? Yelled Loonqual. Is that all you've got to show for 7.5 million years' work? I checked it very thoroughly, said the computer, and that quite definitely is the answer. I think the problem, to be quite honest with you, is that you've never actually known what the question is. But it is the great question, the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, howled Loonqual. Yes, said Deep Thought, with the air of one who suffers fools gladly. But what actually is it? A slow, stupefied silence crept over the men as they stared at the computer and then at each other. Well, you know, it's just everything. Everything, offered Fuchs weakly. Exactly, said Deep Thought. So once you do know what the question actually is, you'll know what the answer means. Oh, terrific, muttered Fuchs, flinging aside his notebook and wiping away a tiny tear. Look, all right, said Loonqual. Can you just please tell us the question? The ultimate question? Yes. Of life, the universe, and everything? Yes. Deep Thought pondered for a moment. Tricky, he said. But can you do it? Cried Loonqual. Deep Thought pondered this for another long moment. Finally, no, he said firmly. Both men collapsed into their chairs in despair. But I'll tell you who can, said Deep Thought. They both looked up sharply. Who? Tell us. Suddenly, Arthur began to feel his apparently non-existent scalp begin to crawl as if he found himself moving slowly but inexorably forward toward the console. But it was only a dramatic zoom on the part of whoever had made the recording, he assumed. I speak of none but the computer that is to come after me, intoned Deep Thought, his voice regaining its accustomed declamatory tones. A computer whose merest operational parameters I am not worthy to calculate, and yet I will design it for you. A computer that can calculate the question to the ultimate answer. A computer of such infinite and subtle complexity that organic life itself shall form part of its operational matrix. And you yourselves shall take on new forms and go down into the computer to navigate its 10 million year program. Yes, I shall design this computer for you, and I shall name it also unto you, and it shall be called the Earth. Fuchs gaped at Deep Thought. What a dull name, he said, and great incisions appeared down the length of his body. Loonqual, too, suddenly sustained horrific gashes from nowhere. The computer console blotched and cracked, the walls flickered and crumbled, and the room crashed upward into its own ceiling. Slarty Bartfast was standing in front of Arthur, holding the two wires. End of tape, he explained. Okay, chapter 29. Zaphod, wake up! Hey, come on, wake up. Just let me stick to what I'm good at, yeah? Muttered Zaphod and rolled away from the voice back to sleep. Do you want me to kick you? Said Ford. Would it give you a lot of pleasure? Said Zaphod blearily. No, nor me. So what's the point? Stop bugging me, Zaphod curled himself up. He got a double dose of the gas, said Trillian, looking down at him. 2 windpipes. And stop talking, said Zaphod. It's hard enough trying to sleep anyway. What's the matter with the ground? It's all cold and hard. It's gold, said Ford. With an amazingly balletic movement, Zaphod was standing and scanning the horizon, because that was how far the gold ground stretched in every direction, perfectly smooth and solid. It gleamed like, it's impossibly to say what it gleamed like, because nothing in the universe gleams in quite the same way that a planet made of solid gold does. Who put all that there? Yelled Zaphod, goggle-eyed. Don't get excited, said Ford. It's only a catalog. A who? A catalog, said Trillian. An illusion. How can you say that? Cried Zaphod, falling to his hands and knees and staring at the ground. He poked it and prodded it. It was very heavy and very slightly soft. He could mark it with his fingernail. It was very yellow and very shiny, and when he breathed on it, his breath evaporated off it in a very peculiar and special way that breath evaporates off solid gold. Trillian and I came around a while ago, said Ford. We shouted and yelled till somebody came, and then carried on shouting and yelling till they got fed up and put us in this their planet catalog to keep us busy till they were ready to deal with us. This is all sensotape. Zaphod stared at him bitterly. Ah, shit, he said. You wake me up from my own perfectly good dream to show me somebody else's? He sat down in a huff. What's that series of valleys over there? He said. Hallmark, said Ford. We had a look. We didn't wake you earlier, said Trillian. The last planet was knee-deep in fish. Fish? Some people like the oddest things. And before that, said Ford, we had platinum. Bit dull. We thought you'd like to see this one, though. Seas of light glared at them in one solid blaze wherever they looked. Very pretty, said Zaphod petulantly. In the sky, a huge green catalog number appeared. It flickered and changed, and when they looked around again, so had the land. As with one voice, they all went, Yuck! The sea was purple. The beach they were on was all composed of tiny yellow and green pebbles, presumably terribly precious stones. The mountains in the distance seemed soft and undulating, and red peaks. Nearby stood a solid silver beach table with a frilly mauve parasol and silver tassels. In the sky, a huge sign appeared, replacing the catalog number. It said, Whatever your tastes, Magrathea can cater for you. We are not proud. And 500 entirely naked women dropped out of the sky on parachutes. In a moment, the scene vanished and left them in a springtime meadow full of cows. Ow, said Zaphod. My brains. You want to talk about it? Said Ford. Yeah, okay, said Zaphod. And all three sat down and ignored the scenes that came and went around them. I figured this, said Zaphod. Whatever happened to my mind, I did it. And I did it in such a way that it wouldn't be detected by the government screening tests. And I wasn't to know anything about it myself. Pretty crazy, right? The other two nodded in agreement. So I reckon. What's so secret that I can't let anybody know about it? Not the galactic government, not even myself. And the answer is, I don't know, obviously. But I put a few things together, and I can begin to guess. When did I decide to run for president? Shortly after the death of President Uden Branks. You remember Uden Ford? Yeah, said Ford. He was the guy we met when we were kids, the Arcturian captain. He was a gas. He gave us conkers when you burst your way into the mega freighter. Said you were the most amazing kid he'd ever met. What's all this? Said Trillian. Ancient history, said Ford. When we were kids together on Betelgeuse, the Arcturian mega freighters used to carry most of the bulky trade between the galactic center and the outlying regions. The Betelgeuse trade scouts used to find the markets, and the Arcturians would supply them. There was a lot of trouble with space pirates before they were wiped out in the Dordelis War, and the mega freighters had to be equipped with the most fantastic defense shield known to the galactic science. They were real brutes of ships and huge. In orbit around a planet, they would eclipse the sun. One day, young Zaphod here decides to raid one on a tri-jet scooter designed for stratosphere work. A mere kid. I mean, forget it. It was crazier than a mad monkey. I went along for the ride because I got some very safe money on him not doing it and didn't want him coming back with fake evidence. So what happens? We get in this tri-jet, which he had souped up into something totally other, crossed 3 parsecs in a matter of weeks, burst our way into a mega freighter, I still don't know how, marched onto the bridge, waved toy pistols, and demanded conkers. A wilder thing I have not known. Lost me a year's pocket money. For what? Conkers. The captain was this really amazing guy. Yuden Branks, said Zaphod. He gave us food, booze, stuff from really weird parts of the galaxy. Lots of conkers, of course. And we had just the most incredible time. Then he teleported us back into the maximum security wing of the Beetlejuice State Prison. He was a cool guy. Went on to become president of the galaxy. Zaphod paused. The scene around them was currently plunging into gloom. Dark mists swirled around them, and elephantine shapes lurked indistinctly in the shadows. The air was occasionally rent with the sounds of illusory beings murdering other illusory beings. Presumably, enough people must have liked this sort of thing to make it a paying proposition. Ford, said Zaphod quietly. Yeah? Just before Yuden died, he came to see me. What? You never told me. No. What did he say? What did he come to see you about? He told me about the heart of gold. It was his idea that I should steal it. His idea? Yeah, said Zaphod, and the only possible way of stealing it was to be at the launching ceremony. Ford gaped at him in astonishment for a moment and then roared with laughter. Are you telling me, he said, that you set yourself up to become the president of the galaxy just to steal that ship? That's it, said Zaphod, with the sort of grin that would get most people locked away in a room with soft walls. But why? Said Ford. What's so important about having it? Dunno, said Zaphod. I think if I'd consciously known what was so important about it and what I would need it for, it would have showed up on the brain screening test and I would never have passed. I think Yuden told me a lot of things that are still locked away. So you think you went and mucked around inside your own brain as a result of Yuden talking to you? He was a hell of a talker. Yeah, but Zaphod, old mate, you want to look after yourself, you know? Zaphod shrugged. I mean, don't you have any inkling of the reason for all of this? Asked Ford. Zaphod thought about this, and doubt seemed to cross his mind. No, he said at last. I don't seem to be letting myself into any of my secrets. Still, he added on further reflection, I can understand that. I wouldn't trust myself further than I could spit a rat. A moment later, the last planet in the catalog vanished from beneath them, and the solid world resolved itself again. They were sitting in a plush waiting room full of glass-top tables and design awards. A tall, Megatherian man was standing in front of them. The mice will see you now, he said. Okay, one more short one. Chapter 30. So there you have it, said Slarty Bartfast, making a feeble and perfunctory attempt to clear away some of the appalling mess of his study. He picked up a piece of paper from the top of a pile, but then couldn't think of anywhere else to put it, so he put it back on top of the original pile, which promptly fell over. Deep thought designed the earth. We built it, and you lived on it. And the Vogons came and destroyed it about 5 minutes before the program was completed, said Arthur, not unbitterly. Yes, said the old man, pausing to gaze helplessly around the room. 10 million years of planning and work gone just like that. 10 million years, Earthman. Can you conceive of that kind of time span? A galactic civilization could grow from a single worm 5 times over in that time. Gone. He paused. Well, that's bureaucracy for you, he added. You know, said Arthur thoughtfully, all this explains a lot of things. All through my life, I've had this strange, unaccountable feeling that something was going on in the world, something big, even sinister, and no one would tell me what it was. No, said the old man, that's just perfectly normal paranoia. Everyone in the universe has that. Everyone, said Arthur. Well, if everyone has that, perhaps it means something. Perhaps somewhere outside the universe we know. Maybe. Who cares, said Slarty Bartfast before Arthur got too excited. Perhaps I'm too old and tired, he continued, but I always think that the chances of finding out what really is going on are so absurdly remote that the only thing to do is to say, hang the sense of it and just keep yourself occupied. Look at me, I design coastlines. I got an award for Norway. He rummaged around in a pile of debris and pulled out a large plexiglass block with his name on it and a model of Norway modeled into it. Where's the sense in that, he said. None that I've been able to make out. I've been doing fjords all my life. For a fleeting moment, they became fashionable, and I got a major award. He turned it over in his hands with a shrug and tossed it aside carelessly, but not so carelessly that it didn't land on something soft. In this replacement Earth we're building, they've given me Africa to do, and of course I'm doing it with all fjords again because I happen to like them, and I'm old-fashioned enough to think that they give a lovely Baroque feel to the continent, and they tell me it's not equatorial enough. Equatorial! He gave a hollow laugh. What does it matter? Science has achieved some wonderful things, of course, but I'd far rather be happy than right any day. And are you? No, that's where it all falls down, of course. Pity, said Arthur with sympathy. It sounds like quite a good lifestyle otherwise. Somewhere on the wall a small white light flashed. Come, said Slarty Bartfast, you are to meet the mice. Your arrival on the planet has caused considerable excitement. It has already been hailed, so I gather, as the third most improbable event in the history of the universe. What were the first two? Oh, probably just coincidences, said Slarty Bartfast carelessly. He opened the door and stood waiting for Arthur to follow. Arthur glanced around him once more and then down at himself, at the sweaty, disheveled clothes he had been lying in the mud in on Thursday morning. I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, he muttered to himself. Beg your pardon? Asked the old man mildly. Oh, nothing, said Arthur. Only joking. That's a good place to stop.